Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order and recognize that we are gathering on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, and we are grateful to their care and stewardship of this land since time immemorial. First action is approval of the agenda, please.
I move we approve the agenda for today.
Thank you very much. Seconder? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And adoption of the minutes, just regular council minutes.
Move adoption of minutes from November 14th.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And Lake Park Master Plan. So we did get a report from staff through our Committee of the Whole. And so the recommendation coming out of Committee of the Whole is there. Should someone like to move it?
Sure. It's this one, right? The council approved the Cumberland Lake Park Master Plan Update 2022 for future Lake Park capital project planning, guidance in park operations, and deliberations with Lake Park Society on the development of a 2023 to 2032 operating agreement for future council consideration.
And you can do that second one as well.
And that council endorsed the village providing a letter of support to the Lake Park Society in support of an application to the province of British Columbia's Destination Development Fund grant program for the glamping project listed in the plan update.
Thank you very much. Seconder?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. And now we have the report on variance permits for parking in VCMU 1 zone. Hello, Courtney.
Okay, Karen is going to be presenting this report.
Excellent. Hello, Karen.
All right, well, perfect one, I think, unless you were
Perfect timing.
waiting. Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My first
It
meeting
is.
with
Yeah.
the new council. Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, congratulations, everyone. Okay, so this report is to ask for referral to the Advisory Plan Commission to provide comment on the draft policy for reviewing and issuing development variances for parking in our downtown core in the VCMU1 zone. The reason we bring forward this policy is that recently, probably not just recent, but since the adoption of the whole zoning amendment bylaw, which changed the parking cash and lieu amount in the downtown core from 3,800 to 10,000, we've had a few applications by existing business owners who to exempt them, or new businesses seeking to open a business, seeking an exemption or waiver of the parking requirement. In a review of those applications, staff have found that one of the reasons this comes about is because new developments don't always pay for the parking that's then later required when a new tenant moves into a building, often at the time of construction or application for a heritage alteration permit, which then triggers a parking requirement, a review of the parking requirement. The use is not known yet, so sometimes developers assume a use that has a fairly low parking requirements, or that's what they assume the use will be, so it's hard to know ahead of time. And then when someone actually applies to move into the space, the parking requirement, it hasn't been met in its entirety, and then the onus is on the business owner seeking to move in to meet the outstanding parking requirement. The business license application triggers that review. So the policy is to seek to provide some guidelines for the review of the applications that we're receiving for variance in parking, to look at ways that these applications, to guide the review of the application, and to look at how that application may impact the downtown core, both in a positive and negative way. So the draft policy is listing a number of things that staff would look at in the review of the applications, and we looked at the policy mentions briefly residential parking as well as commercial parking. To be complete, the residential parking, generally the recommendation is that that be addressed at the full requirement is addressed when the developer constructs a building, but we would know the unit count, so it's not as much of an issue in terms of not knowing what the parking requirement would be. But there's still also applications that come forward at times to seek to reduce the parking requirement. And then for commercial parking, we've identified 3 broad categories to consider when reviewing applications. One is supporting small businesses, services, arts, and culture. How does the proposed new business that's seeking to open support, meet kind of the criteria under that one? Is it a business that we need downtown? Are they creating an arts and culture space, or is it a business that perhaps has been already in place for a long time and that's just seeking to expand? And then the other category is heritage conservation. So the considerations would be then, would the applicant, through a variance in parking, would that help the applicant to retain the heritage building? Would that maybe reduce any changes to the property that might affect the building, or retention of heritage trees in the downtown core? And then lastly, the third consideration would be whether the proposed, whether waiving the parking would help support retention and diversity of character in the downtown core. So sometimes if you have outdoor seating spaces in downtown core, the option is if you are to meet all the parking on site, is to either reducing that outdoor area or you put in parking. So is that desirable for the character and form character and the ambiance in the village? So these are the key considerations, and so they would be triggered when someone applies for variance, and it would still ultimately be a decision of council. This policy would guide the application and would also send a signal to potential applicants of whether their application is likely to be successful, or how to maybe adjust the application so it can be successful, and the village would get more of the benefits potentially that could result from a reduction in parking.
Excellent, thank you. Questions, Councillor Kettler?
Thank you. Yeah, so I think that once it's after the fact, say for example with a heritage building, and they are proposing the business is proposing a new use, I think we can look at that on the individual merits of that business if they're applying for variance in parking. But I was actually concerned about sort of this a bit of a loophole when we're doing completely new buildings, and the developer is just using the lowest parking use as the use that he's or she is putting in, when that may not be the case. I was wondering if we could make part of the security that we hold for the building the parking requirement on that. So if they say it's going to be, a business that only requires 2 spots, and then within a 6-month window, of the business, applying, they or now it's like 8 spaces or something like that. Could that be a security on the developer?
That's an interesting question. Typically the parking cash in lieu would be due at time of building permits. So the heritage alteration permit would outline when the parking cash in lieu is due, and usually it's building permit. So then, if the tenants are known at that time, then the parking could be adjusted, because the final calculation really only happens at that time.
Yeah.
If the tenancy still is not known, I think the zoning, I'd have to look into this.
Yeah.
Again, if it gets referred to a committee, I'd have time to look into that. But I believe it's probably the zoning bylaw would have to outline maybe what a default is. If it's not known,
Okay.
then the zoning bylaw would have to specify, for example, default is retail. and we could probably possibly do that. Whether we
Right.
can hold the security for that or not, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Look at that.
What if, I would suggest, what if you front loaded it and then they get a refund if there is something, that way they always pay the
Lower,
high,
yeah,
that
yeah.
would be a way around that.
Like the default is,
The zoning bylaw
Restaurant or
could
something.
potentially identify a
Yeah.
default if it's not known,
yeah.
and potentially then perhaps we could issue a refund. That's something we'd have to find out. Yeah.
But it sounds like what is happening is that they're just kind of saying that they may or may not have a business going in there, but they're saying that the intended use happens to be the one with the lowest parking requirements. So, would we be able to, we can't just use a default if they're saying, no, it is going to be intended for this use, right?
If it's not known, we have to look into that. I believe you can have a default be retail if it's not known, if the tenants are not known at the time. Sometimes the units that get pre-sold or there's an interest and
Yeah.
then the tenants are known. If they truly aren't, we'll look into that. The default could potentially be just retail. But then if it's a tenancy that requires less parking, that's so the average requires less park, can we refund them? Yeah, we'd have to look into
Okay.
that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else?
Just, as this is a variance, can you do a partial? Can you reduce the cost? Or is it a 10,000 or nothing? Is that the only options? Or can you come back and say, yeah, we agree that this is going to be a hardship for your business. We're going to reduce it to like $3,000 or something. Is
I-
that an option?
I believe so. So
Okay.
the application would be, say, 2 parking spaces, 20,000. And then council said we're willing to reduce one of the spots or willing to reduce, 1.5.
Okay.
But we do feel some funding to our parking reserve fund is required to be able to construct parking elsewhere or regulate parking in some other way.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for that report. There is a recommendation there to refer.
I'll move that council refer the council policy on review of development variance permits for parking in the village core commercial mixed use VCMU 1 zone to the Advisory Planning Commission for comment.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, and conference attendance 2023.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. So we've brought forward this report to give council an opportunity to discuss which conferences they'd like to attend in the 2023 year, as well as talk about if there's any interest in attending any of the FCM conferences during the four-year council term. Council can, of course, always discuss alternate budget allocations for this year and for the future years of the term, if council wishes. The policy, council does have a policy on conference attendance, which sets out that members may attend the Island AVICC conference or the provincial UBCM each year, plus local events or conferences to a maximum of $1,000 for each member. A member may also choose to attend another event in lieu of UBCM or AVICC, use those funds and put them to a different purpose. The policy also says that each member may attend FCM or the FCM Sustainable Communities conferences once during the four-year term. And that would give, like, between the 5 members, each member would go during their term if there's interest. So the 2023 budget is at $30,900, and allocated, there's some estimate costs of local and cross-country travel there. So each member would have about $5,000 of that conference to spend, and between the 5 members, that would leave about $4,000 to $5,000 for an FCM attendance.
Okay. Questions? Comments?
Did Councillor Sullivan submit anything?
No. Not that I saw. Did Councillor Sullivan send anything in?
No,
No.
not to me.
And I'm just curious of past use. Have councillors used up their full budget pretty much every year, or?
I, that, that's hard to tell for the past few years because COVID really threw a
Yeah, of
wrench
course.
in travel. We did, council did allocate it a bit differently over the past few years because a lot of events were offered virtually. So there were some extra funds, I believe, each year. And I think there was definitely an interest in some of these other opportunities that are listed in the report, like the Higher Ground and the Climate Leaders Institute and those types of alternative events, not the traditional UBCM or AVICC. It's by no means mandatory for council members to attend those two conferences, but over the last little while, there's definitely been more interest in all members attending, but it's by no means essential that you go each year.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I do intend to go to both AVICC and UBCM as I do every year. We have, well, every year since I have been on council, there has been at least one, sometimes two resolutions that I've put forward at the conference for the voting of the delegates to advocate for various things that the village has decided that we need to talk to the province about. So I'm sure we will have another set of resolutions for this year and probably each year again of our term. So yes, that's something I'm very interested in, is continuing to put forward those resolutions and advocate with the province.
Yeah, so for new councillors, the any resolutions that we want to take to UBCM have to go through AVICC first. So AVICC happens in the spring. We generate our resolutions, then we take them to AVICC, and then if they pass AVICC, they go to UBCM. So then we would want to be at both AVICC and UBCM to speak to those resolutions as they come in front of the membership. And then the Local Government Leadership Academy and whatever the other one's called, the other LGA opportunity are more, so the AVICC and UBCM are advocacy opportunities and LGA presents learning opportunities. So I think for new councillors, it's important that you get to the Leadership Academy as it's offered, when it's offered. And yeah, and then there's, like there is in the report, there's a ton of other stuff that comes up that is also generally of interest to some councils. So, so I think right now we want to decide on 2023, but if there's interest in looking at the travel policy again to simplify it or whatever, to have input from this council, we can do that at a later date. So I would also like to go to AVICC and UBCM and and possibly FCM as well, if there's room and if that's possible.
There's also another one coming up in Nanaimo in February. What is that one?
Is that AVICC?
That
No,
is
it's the local
newly
leadership.
elected,
Yeah.
and that we did budget separately for that,
Okay.
for all members to attend if they so wish.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'd like to attend that one because that's for new members. The other two, I'll have to check dates and see what I can do. I'd like to attend them, but it'll again depend on my job.
Yeah.
And in lieu of those, I would probably like to come and do the Climate Leaders Institute one in June. That sounds interesting.
Okay, and I found really affordable accommodation when I went last year
Where in Vancouver?
at the hostel at UBC. It's great.
Great.
Councillor Barecki?
I would likely attend UBCM, and I'd have to see about my work availability for the other ones.
For the other
but,
ones.
I think the LGLA or LGLA is probably valuable for new elected officials, so
Yeah,
probably that one. So
okay. Is that enough?
Can I confirm whether there's any other interest in the Sustainable Communities FCM? Because I think that one in 2023 would, I think, if there's agreement that
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah, so, the what's it called? FCM
Sustainable.
Sustainable Communities doesn't happen every year. I think it's every couple of
Every
years.
second year it says,
Yeah. So this year it is, and it's in Ottawa. So, which means it's very expensive, but it also gives us access to potentially federal ministers, which could be valuable. So, so that's why I'm interested in that one as well as others may be.
It says it's also available online.
Yes.
Again, you probably won't have as much access if you're
No.
online.
I do intend to go to that, but as chair of the regional district, so I think that will be a different budget.
Yay.
Nice.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So do we need, we don't need, we just need to, do you want a motion to receive the conference attendance?
Yes, please.
Could I have a motion to receive that
Oversee.
report? Thank you. And a seconder?
Second.
And all in favor? Thank you. Okay, utility fee bylaws. Michelle, is that you?
That's me. So at the November 14th meeting, council did direct me to update the water, sewer, and solid waste user rates bylaws with the information provided at that meeting, and that report can be found on page 11 of the November 14th agenda. And so attached to this report is the water rates, sewer rates, and solid waste collection fee amendment bylaws for consideration of the first three readings tonight from council. So page 24 of the agenda outlines the different rates. I could outline them for you, but they're in the bylaw and they're also outlined on that page. So you can let me know if you'd like me to. And then as you move through, the financial implications on page 25 actually talks about what the revenue is that those fees generate. So for water, there's just over 765,000 for the year, and it's using $85,000 of your rate stabilization reserve. And then the sewer and storm is just over 984,000, and it's using 85,000 of your stabilization as well. And the solid waste actually includes rate stabilization for council to have the option to add automated cart collection if you so choose. You still have to make that decision at a later date, and that would be the rates are built to have it start 2025 in the bylaw. And then just on page 25, you'll see that I've outlined the 5 years, 2023 to 2027 increases and actual amounts that a single family would pay using those rates, where the average, the median type user, water user, and it's compared to 2022 as well that they actually paid. And on page 26, I've outlined what a typical building would pay, and also what the Regional Hospital Laundry Society would pay, which I provided to you on the 14th as well. And so staff is just recommending that council give the first 3 readings to all 3 bylaws attached tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Troy?
Yeah, I've
Sorry,
got a
Councillor
couple
Carey.
just on some of the numbers. Just wondering why the rates are increasing at different rates for the different classifications. Like residential rates, the water use is going up 9%, but multifamily, the water rate doesn't change at all.
And you're talking the variable, right? Or
Yes,
yeah.
the variable.
Okay, well, it's all dependent on water consumption, those variable rates, and so so we have the increase in revenue that's occurred, which is about 6%, and then the rates did increase. What did you say? What percentage?
Well, residential rates went up about 9%.
Yeah, so that's probably
From
because
74 cents to 81 cents, I think.
that's right. So that's probably because maybe the water consumption decreased a little bit, so the rate has to go up to accommodate that. And then you'll see the multifamily didn't increase at all, and that's because last year. So what I have to do is I have to use two quarters of water consumption from the previous year.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that consumption yet. And so what would have happened is last year the rates maybe would have been a little bit higher for the multifamily, and so it just leveled off once I had the proper consumption for that. And so they probably did go up a little bit in their consumption, but not compared to last year.
Okay.
So it just stayed stable.
And then my next question is, what determines how much the ICI rates go up for their fixed rates? Some of them are jumping 54%, some are jumping 44%, depending on.
Yeah.
Consumption.
Let's just have a quick look at what they're actually jumping, because I just sort of went with the smallest meter size all the way and then told you what the largest meter size is.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
those were the 2 I looked at as
That's
well.
right. So all of them actually should just jump by 4.24%. And so if you're seeing a much larger jump than that,
Thought that's. Where did I find this?
yeah. So
Yeah, it went from 364 to 524, which is about a 40% jump.
oh, sorry. No, it should have increased by 44%, the fixed, and that is because
And then the fixed for the smaller ones jumped by almost 50, just shy of 50%. I guess no, that's.
no, it
about
is
the same.
40. It's 44%. It was
Is it
the
across the board?
variable went up 4%. Yeah, but the fixed went up and that's because that was probably another another adjustment for the fixed, because I tried to with last year the multifamily grew like considerably because we had like a few complexes, and so I was trying to make sure that the difference, or the multifamily's portion of the revenue, was the same as the 10 or 11% kind of where it hovers, which is what the rate structure is.
Okay.
And so then that impacted the ICI last year, and when I adjusted it back this year, it had to be a hit on the ICI for the fixed, because it just had to be adjusted a little bit more than what it should have been last year.
And then just one last question. On the actual bylaw itself on page 2829, there seems to be 2 kinds of fixed costs. One's based on the meter size, and then another one based on usage.
Sorry, which page? 28?
28 and 29.
Page 29. Oh, there's the, okay, so the top one there, based on the meter size, that's
Yes.
for ICI. And then down below is a flat rate fees for water, and that is for all of those different types of uses, and that is for if somebody refuses to have a water meter installed, or yeah, it's for somebody where we can't read their consumption, but it's not to do with natural
I see
causes.
it. It's an either or.
That's right. So
Got it.
what the bylaw tells you, the actual bylaw, not this amendment one, what it says is if for no fault of, ours or whatever, that we can't read, like they don't have a water meter or whatever, then the bylaw says that we will charge double this flat fee because we can't determine what kind of water rates they have. And so that's how we get around that if they don't have a water meter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions? Excellent. So there's a recommendation there.
I'd like to recommend that council give first, second, and third reading to Water Rates Amendment Bylaw number 1182, 2022, to Sanitary Sewer Rates Amendment Bylaw number 1183, 2022, and to Solid Waste Collection Fees Amendment Bylaw 1184, 2022.
Seconder?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, and financial plan amendment bylaw.
Oh, I think. Sorry about that. Just a second.
That's okay. Take your time.
35. Okay, so the financial plan amendment bylaws should come to you a few times during the year. This is the first time you're actually seeing it, and you probably will get another one in January for some adjustments. And so one of the main things that I've provided for you is an attachment to this report is a reconciliation of your adopted financial plan from January when you first adopted it, and I'm just going to tell you what page that's on.
41.
Thank you. It's 41. And so what I've done with the first column of this reconciliation is that's what the original bylaw that you adopted is. Those are, all the different categories of your revenues and then your expenditures. And then the middle column is what your budget amendments are. That's been recommended to you throughout the year, and you've made motions to direct staff to amend the bylaw. And then there's a couple of other reasons for those amendments, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute here. And then the third column is the original plus or minus the amendments equals what the amended bylaw is, and that's attached to this report for your, and staff's recommending first three readings to that. So going back to the actual report then, how I've worked this out is what I do is I outline all of the council resolutions that you've made throughout the year to amend the bylaw. That's the first part of the report. And then what I also outlined is all of, and this should be the last year that I do this, is all of the motions you've made to use COVID restart funds. And so that's your next, that's starting on page 37 of the report, and those are all the different motions you've made throughout the year as well. And then finally, there's a small section of staff recommended amendments, and those are just items that either, like if we were able to get a grant during the year, things like that, or sometimes you've made motions maybe in a closed session and there's an amendment from here, and so I give as much information as I can from that, but without giving too much from the closed session. And so that's what the first starting of these amendments are. These recommended is to do with the Coal Creek properties that I would just like to put in a budget for, because we've started expending against those properties, so then we need to cover it. And I'm recommending the general financial stabilization reserves for those. The other staff recommended amendment is your bulk water sales to Royston. So we just kept the rates and the consumption the exact same as last year, and it's looking like there's going to be a significant increase, and there was a pretty big increase last year too. We've just decided to keep it all stable, so that because it goes in and out, but this year I think it would be a really good idea if you use that extra revenue instead of letting it fall to surplus to just pay down the Public Works land debt, just to save some interest, because now we have interest rates going up quite considerably. So that's what I've recommended with that amendment. And then there's a list of your carry forward projects that were started last year but not finished, and so then they had to roll into 2022. And that's one of your budget amendments you would normally get at the beginning of the year, and for that. And that's listed in one of your attachments to this report as well, and so is the COVID projects. And then we received a little bit of money from BC Hydro. And then staff, we do have some cash in lieu from developers for trees that we require them to plant a tree, and if their particular development just doesn't lend well to that planting a tree or something doesn't work out, we actually take cash in lieu. So staff's recommending to add those cash in lieu to that BC Hydro grant and to leverage it and get some extra trees. And then there was a while back, the PAC applied for a grant for safety measures around the school there, and so staff worked with them to put those safety measures into place. And so I need a budget amendment because we have to bring the expenses in, and then they will pay us for those expenses, and they'll get the grant from their side. But I still have to have a budget amendment for that. And then every year we have property taxes from growth, because we approved the budget prior to finding that number out, and it goes to the policing tax. So it's just very clean and transparent just to do a budget amendment for that amount. And so that's what I'm recommending for your growth taxes. And then we also when we have surpluses at the end of the previous year and they fall into surplus, and then they put the annual surplus reserve over the optimum balance that's in our reserve and surplus policy, we just recommend to council to move those into a stabilization reserve. And anything over optimum balances in the stabilization would then cascade into like some capital reserves after that. But that didn't happen this year because we're using our stabilization for projects and stuff. And so that, I think, that is it. And so I'm just recommending the first 3 readings.
Questions?
What is that? What is that cap rate spills over into the capital reserves then? Is it a percentage, or how does it?
Well, actually, yeah, that's a good question. So attached to this report is your reserve and surplus policy, and there's a matrix at the end of it all that talks about all the optimum balances of each reserve. And so you're talking about the stabilization one, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So it's like 3. Let me just get to the bottom here. I can't quite remember the exact amount. It is so the reserve in the general is for the optimum balance is in the general stabilization is it's just a sec here, sorry.
Here it is, attachments.
is $960,000. And so if the money that goes into there then spills over that 960, which it didn't, it's at 915, it would go over to the capital. And then for water, though, that was just your general, and for water it is 300,000, and it's less than that, so it doesn't spill over as well into the capital. And then for sewer, it's we're actually, if you take out your rate stabilization out of that balance, you actually only have about $48,000 in that stabilization reserve, which we've always been a little low on the sewer. It's a real hard one to get up. But yeah, so the optimum is 330 for that reserve. So we'll keep building that one until it gets to the optimum for sure.
Good.
Yep. No, thank you.
That's good.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the extensive report, Michelle. That's great,
Okay.
especially for the new folks. So there is a motion there.
Okay, I'd like to move that council give, hang on, to make sure I'm on the right one here. I'd like to move that council give first, second, and third reading to the 2022 to 2026 financial plan amendment bylaw number 1180, 2022.
Seconder.
I'll second.
Thank you, Counselor. All in favor? Thank you. And revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw.
Okay. I think that's the final one tonight. So this bylaw will come to you every year around this time. And so what it is it is a calculation of your tax revenues as a percentage of that, which allows you a balance of what you're allowed to borrow against that tax revenue during the first 6 months before you collect all the taxes, if you have to. And so we don't have to, because we do have a fair amount of cash flow that we manage each year so we use that as our cash flow uses. But what we do like to do is have a line of credit at the credit union, just in case something happens and we fall short and we need to use some cash. We haven't had to in many years, but it's a really good safe ground thing. And so you could have up to like how much is it, like 6 million or 8 million or something like that. But really, so we're just saying that we would like the bylaw to actually allow for $3 million in borrowing, but our line of credit is only 2 million. And so that would just leave us $1 million in the off chance that I could quickly phone and ask for it to be increased because we're in an emergency. But, so.
Questions?
It's basically just
Yeah.
our credit card in between paychecks.
Yeah, exactly. No, seems prudent.
Thank you. That's the way better way of
Yep.
saying it.
Without the credit card fees.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a motion there
Oh, sorry.
and a question.
Oh, I
if
just
you
had a
like.
question.
Yep.
What's the risk? And I mean, since it's just an insurance policy, in case, what is the risk of just going for the full 6.1 million?
Nothing. There wouldn't be a risk if you wanted to do that.
Would
The only difference is that in order to get good line of credit rates in case we actually do use it, I secure it with a term deposit. But we do have term deposits that we could secure for 6 million
Okay.
if you wanted to do that.
Is there any benefit to that, or I mean, it would cover risk in one way.
Yeah, if something really bad happened, that would be the benefit of having $6 million, which and I would never use it unless there was something that really needed.
Yeah.
Is it worth discussion looking at that? Or?
If there's interest.
I think we're already upping it by $1 million, so we're already giving ourselves a little bit more leeway than we had in the past. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel comfortable with
Yeah.
the 3.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Yeah, it was just for
Yeah.
discussion.
Interesting.
But I
Interesting
can-
conversation, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely think about it, in future. There really isn't anything for
Yeah.
the actual bylaw to say it, but.
I'm
so
just saying if there was
if
some
there's interest.
huge disaster that befell the
Mm-hmm.
village and we were in a pinch, you know, maybe it was
Yeah.
localized earthquake, fire, something like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we needed money fast, this would expedite that process.
Yeah.
Do we have another avenue for that though, under emergency management?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have your provincial emergency funds that you would get paid back. So this is cash flow on those funds. Like, so it's because in emergency you'd have to be doing things on demand really fast and paying for things, and then you have to wait for provincial to get back to pay you back. So, yeah, just depends.
Okay.
And then of course the regional district, we also would get help through them for emergencies like an operations center and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
Right.
The regional district also backs our loans in a way if we can't repay.
yes,
Right.
yeah. So that's definitely the low risk part of
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah.
Okay.
If that happened, yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Lots of cushion for us. Okay, so there's a recommendation there.
Sure, I've been reading most of these. Let me find this one. That council give first, second, and third reading to the 2022 to 2026 nope, I'm on the wrong one, sorry. The council give first, second, and third reading of the revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw number 1181, 2022.
Seconder,
Second.
all in favor? Thank you very much. And that's it. Except for notices, which is Advisory Planning Commission at 4 p.m. on December 8th. And the next regular council meeting is at 5:30 on December 12th, our final council meeting for the year. And now we're going to closed.
Question.
Question period?
Oh, sorry, question period first. Oops, a daisy. We have an audience. Questions, anybody? No? Nothing online either?
We have no questions through email yet. If we can wait a few moments.
Is anybody watching? It's not staff?
No, there's no questions, Mayor Brown.
I do have a quick question, but if I could just, it's not really a question, it's probably prudent. and you
Has
can
to be a
advise
question.
us To wait until it comes back from the APC about the parking variance. I mean, I have questions about that, but it seems to me that it's, because it's being referred to the APC, it doesn't make sense for me to have questions tonight, or does it?
Well, since, Courtney's still here, so yeah, you could ask.
Okay, well, one quick one is it's just, I guess it's, to me, it's kind of a little bit like asking what, it's like the spinning rainbow wheel on the computer a little bit when it comes to parking variances coming in from the development sector, obviously. And it has been referred to in Councillor Kettler's assessment of how parking variances can be requested depending on the usage, certainly of the commercial space. It's obvious when there's 20 apartments or whatever, blah, blah. But where is the trigger? Like, is the trigger with, okay, it goes from being an office space to a restaurant with 20 chairs in there, obviously more parking. Is it generally to the owner of the building, or is it the renter? Because I've obviously, on the downtown core, I've heard, like, you always hear stories, oh, I'm gonna be renting this place, and all of a sudden, is it the renter that needs to then, like, is there a variance that happens from the renter's perspective
When there's a change of use.
when there's
Yeah.
a change of use?
But
Does
it-
it go to the renter, or does it go to the owner of the building?
the business owner.
It goes to the property owner, I think, and then the property owner would pass it on to the business owner.
If it's a new building, then it's
If
the
it's a-
property owner.
yeah.
If it's a existing building and there's a change of use, then it's the person who's doing the change of use, the business owner.
building.
Who's actually applying, yeah.
Yeah.
Did we get that right?
Yeah, and if I could just to add a little bit to that, like I think we, from what we hear, we probably have some situations where even when it really is the owner's responsibility to provide the parking, because the parking is something that could be physical if it's an actual spot, and so it will remain if the tenancy changes. But what might be happening is some people who are new to business maybe and not knowing these are questions they should ask when they begin to embark on this process of starting to look into renting something. They might not know the right questions to ask. They might not have this nailed down in a rental agreement. So kind of when rubber hits the road they've advanced so far that, finally it's the right time to talk to the village about their building permit or or something they need from the village. They're so invested already in the process, just saying, well, that should be the owner's responsibility doesn't exactly solve the issue that they found themselves in.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is essentially the question that I was asking, because does it not make sense to have that somewhere in, I don't know, in the commercial, there must be something, somewhere there could be, like passing that on as a rental agreement, like how can you rent a space to somebody without knowing that it's going to, red flag up the parking variance need and or, like, is it the renter that then would have to, like, I guess I feel like there's a place where this falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it should be in a rental agreement, but then the village isn't involved in the rental
Yeah.
agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, but is it then a bylaw thing? Like, wow, you've got, there's 16 tables in your library, or, and you're serving coffee all of a sudden, or there's a change, like it's a record store that becomes a coffee shop. Is there something there that should be thought about, in terms of renting commercial space?
I mean, I suppose that's the backup, right? It would be contacting bylaw if you've got a use that's not consistent with parking, but it would be hard you'd have to determine what the parking was and what the parking requirement was for
Well,
that use
Come in for business license.
before you
And then it
complain. Yeah, and then if it changes, you're back to the same situation.
Yeah, so when people get business licenses, those do trigger building permit inspections at times, like if there's a change of use.
Yeah.
So it would be caught unless,
Unless the use changes without a business license.
without a building
happening,
permit, really.
which
is
then would
like-
be a
Because
bylaw.
it'll always change, it'll always trigger a business license, but if there's no building permit required, that's where it might be a bit different. As soon as a building permit's required, that's when you're gonna find out how many parking and we do catch parking as well at business license, even if there isn't a change, like even if there isn't a building permit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we catch those.
Okay, good question, see? We all learned. Okay, and nothing new's come in via the World Wide Web? Okay. So there's a closed portion recommendation somebody would like to read?
You want us to read the whole thing? I recommend that we move to a closed portion of the meeting pursuant to, and this is closed to the public, pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter, to consider a personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or other position appointed by the municipality. I guess, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Okay, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages and that, in the view of council, could reasonably expected could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. And M, a matter that under another enactment is such that the public may be excluded from the meeting.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Thanks for coming, audience.
Great audience.
Have a good night.
tonight.